Congressman Buddy Carter's coming up. We're going to have to spend 2 minutes about him telling me how good the Falcons are going to be. That's what all Falcons fans do, is they start the season and they tell you what a great defense they're going to have, blah, 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 blah. And then the season comes, they don't do crap. Or they get to the Super Bowl and blow a 5-touchdown lead in the second half. Congressman Buddy Carter, great to have you with us.
Oh, thank you for that warm welcome.
So tell me about the Falcons. My friends in Atlanta, as you know, I'm from Georgia. I was there for too many to count, 30 years. My friends are telling me they got the best defense they've ever had. True or false?
True. It is true. The defense is strong, as you would expect from a Dan Quinn coach team. Let's face it, when he was in Seattle, that was his strong point, and he's carried that over to Atlanta as well.
All right, so they open tonight in Philadelphia. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, no question about it. We're going to take them.
All right, well,
Philly's never been able to beat Atlanta.
I know, they never beat Atlanta, so they got Nick Foles starting. I guess Wentz is still not in a position to play. So I kind of agree with you. I got too many legit people I know in Atlanta really excited about the Falcons this season. And, I always get this from them. They're always excited. See, I'm a Titans fan, and I know we suck. So, it's kind of like we're going to win 9 games and maybe squeeze into the playoffs. But my Atlanta friends are really fired up about this team.
And with good reason. There's a lot of optimism this year. And, we had a great draft and got some great players added to the roster, so we're excited.
All right, we're with South Georgia House of Representatives Congressman Buddy Carter. He represents the 1st District of Georgia. He's a Republican. That is the Savannah area along South Georgia. It was formerly represented by our good friend Jack Kingston, who is now on CNN occasionally, but he's winning too many arguments, so he's not on that much. I got to get to 2 things, but the first thing is the talk of the day is this op-ed that came out in the New York Times, which has a lot of people like me who are Trump supporters beside themselves. This yellow belly weasel rat sending an anonymous op-ed to the Times saying, I'm the protector of the people so that big bad Trump can't get you. I mean, what do you make of this thing?
Well, that's obviously, I couldn't agree with you more. Someone who is not willing to put their name to it, but also you got to question the Times. Anytime that I've ever submitted a letter to the editor, I've had to have my name on it, and they wouldn't publish something that was anonymous. So I think it's twofold. I think the responsibility of the author of the op-ed. I think it's very irresponsible of them not to identify themselves. I think it's irresponsible of the New York Times to print that piece without identifying who it was.
Congressman, the level of nonsense that's going on in the White House, what is the reaction to this with the Republicans on Capitol Hill?
Well, with the Republicans on Capitol Hill, I would say that we really like the policy that's coming out of the White House. And, there are times when you have to separate the two. I don't necessarily always agree or like the way that things are handled, but boy, do I ever like the policy that's coming out. I mean, this president is addressing issues that are important to our country and to the future of our country, and I could not applaud him more for what he's doing. Look at what our economy's doing. We're booming, and these are the best of times, and it's thanks to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It's thanks to what this president has done. Look at what we're doing for the security of our country. This president has identified that we've got to strengthen our borders, and those are the type of things that I think are kitchen table issues that people are really interested in. So I applaud the president and the policies. Look at the Supreme Court nominees. I mean, we're about to get our second one in, and can you only imagine if she had been elected president and been making the Supreme Court nominees, what the future of our country would be.
What are your Democratic colleagues saying about the bullying type shenanigans that are going on at the hearings? Are they embarrassed by it, or are they cheering it on?
Well,
I mean, I'm asking you, not publicly, but what do they say behind the curtain?
Well, they don't say a whole lot, and they just kind of gloss over it as if it's to be expected. Whichever side happens to be on the losing side, if you will, that's expected. I don't accept that by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time, I believe in freedom of speech. But come on, what's been happening here recently has been just ridiculous.
The House hanging in the balance. Here's what one senior Democratic operative told me the other day, and I want to get your take on it. He said that they have access to internal polling, and he said if you take all the House seats that lean or are safe Republican, it's 203. If you take all the House seats that lean or are safe Democrat, it's 202. Means it's a dead heat. So he said there are 30 seats, toss-ups, that are going to determine who controls the House. And he said if we, Democrats, win 16, Nancy Pelosi Speaker. He says it's as simple as that. We got to win 16 of these seats. We're not worried about the 203. We're not worried about our 202. Everybody's focused on these 30 seats. We, Democrats, have to win 16 of them. Is that the same thing you've heard? Is that really where we stand now? Is it coming down to that?
Well, there's no question that it's tight. We all acknowledge that. But at the same time, I'm very confident that we're going to come back in the majority.
Why?
I just think we've got good quality candidates, and I think the issues are on our side. I think that what the president is doing and leading our party, I think, speaks for itself. And I think at the end of the day, the American voters are going to acknowledge that, and they're going to acknowledge it at the voting booth. And we're not going to come back with a 23-seat majority. We recognize that, but I'm very confident it'll be between 5 and 10 seats that we're in the majority.
I think you'll be in the majority, and I think it's going to be 5 seats. We're with U.S. Congressman Buddy Carter, Republican from Georgia. He represents the 1st District along the coast of Savannah and also the southern part of Georgia's stretching out into the Valdosta area. Right?
Right.
And he is with us now. Congressman, when you're on the campaign trail, running for re-election, talking to voters, what are they saying? What's on their mind?
Well, we just got back from a district work month, and the month of August we were in the district, and right now, keep in mind, as you say, I represent the entire coast of Georgia. We've got 2 major seaports, the Port of Savannah, the Port of Brunswick. The Port of Savannah is the number 2 container port on the eastern seaboard. The Port of Brunswick is the number 2 roll-on, roll-off port in the country. Because of that, they're very concerned about tariffs. Tariffs have been something that have not only because of the ports, but also because we have a strong ag presence, a strong forestry presence, and all of that added together makes everyone in the district somewhat apprehensive about what's going on with tariffs. Now, having said that, I will tell you that I support the president what he's trying to do. If we don't call out these bad actors now, we'll never do it, and I applaud the president for doing that. China has to be held accountable for what they're doing. They're just simply not playing fair, and we all want fair and free trade. Even the president has said it. First thing he said when he got over to Europe was, "Hey, let's just do away with tariffs. Let's just have free open trade." And so he's made it very clear. But we recognize that there's going to be some short-term pain in order to get some long-term gain with this. Tariffs are a lot of their concerns. The economy, they're very pleased with what's going on in the economy right now. They're concerned about securing our borders. I think that's very important to them as well.
So let's get to some foreign policy, Congressman, may we? Let's get to the Yemeni crisis, where you've got the Houthis in Yemen supported ostensibly on the ground by the Iranians. No Iranian troops there. You've got the Saudi Emirates coalition bombing them into Yemen. 50,000 people so far are dead. So casualties, 50,000. That's a lot of innocent civilians dying. And the U.S. and the U.K. are behind the Saudi Emirates coalition, helping their pilots, giving them guidance, training, selling them bombs. One of them blows up a school bus. One of them blows up a market. Why are we there?
Well, that's a good question, and I've always said we can't be the world's police, and we understand that, but we do have, I think, a responsibility as being a world leader to protest these things and to actually, whether we become involved or not, that's another question, but we just can't set aside. One of the things that I've had the opportunity to do as a member of Congress is to travel and to travel globally, and that gives a different perspective for those who haven't had that opportunity. The world looks at us as being the leader, and they look at us particularly as being the leader of the free world, and it's important. We acknowledge that role, but at the same time, we can't be the world's police, and there's a fine line between that. The president's made it clear, we need to concentrate on what's going on over here in this country, and we acknowledge that we have a responsibility to the free world, but at the same time, we need to concentrate on what's going on over here.
Well, that's what President Trump ran on.
Exactly.
As you're seeing, as part of the government now, Congressman Buddy Carter, it's a little easy to unravel the military-industrial complex, and the money that's being spent is very tough to do. But we're going to get a new Congress. I think you're going to be in the majority. Do you have a selection for House Speaker on the Republican side? If you do have the majority, have you made a decision, or are you going to wait and see?
No, I am supporting Kevin McCarthy, and I was a supporter early on. I've worked with Kevin very closely, and I think he'll do an excellent job. I think he's doing a great job now as majority leader. Jim Jordan is certainly a great candidate, and I think if elected, he would do a wonderful job. And if he were elected, I would certainly be supporting him and doing everything I can to help him to advance our agenda. But at this point, I am solidly behind Kevin and look forward to his leadership.
Does he have the votes?
I think he does. I'm very confident that he does.
It's going to be interesting to see how it rolls out. It would seem to me that it would be tough to topple McCarthy. Plus, he's a pretty prolific fundraiser.
Yes, he is, and that's important.
That's job is you got to raise money.
Sure,
I remember the first interview I had with Newt Gingrich after he became Speaker, and the first question I said is, "What's about this job that shocked you?" He was in about 2 weeks. And he said, number one, I had no idea the media hates us. I always knew they did, but not to this extent. So he said, I fight the media every day. And he said, second, I don't really like raising money, but that's like 80% of my job. I got to go out and raise money. And so I don't really like doing that, but I'm going to get good at it because I'll figure it out. Those were the two things that Newt said to me back in the day, and he certainly did that. But it's like the people that say they're not going to vote for Pelosi if the Democrats win. I had one Democratic congressman off the record, Congressman Carter, say to me yesterday that if the Democrats win, that Pelosi is going to be the speaker. Because he said, how do you take all of the money she's giving you and then vote against her? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's the same thing in your own situation.
Well, to a certain extent it is. It's unfortunate, and I know that the optics are not good, but it's part of it. In order to get your message out there, you've got to be able to afford to do that, and that's very important. It's not the pretty part, but it is an important part.
So going forward, what are your top priorities as you get into the new Congress? What are the top 3 things you want to see done 2019?
Well, no question about it for me, because I'm currently the only pharmacist serving in Congress. Healthcare is number one for me. We've got to address the healthcare situation in our country. We, in subsets of that would be the opioid epidemic, would be prescription drug pricing. All of that is part of the healthcare situation that we find ourselves in. So, that would be the number one issue. Immigration is certainly up there. I mean, we've got to address this situation. It's not an easy situation, not an easy issue. Even within our own party, there's a lot of dissension, and we recognize that. So the immigration has to be within the top 3 as well, and probably to continue with our economic growth. That is very important as well.
Congressman, let me ask you this. When you get to immigration, we have catch and release, which is not a policy, right? It's just do nothing, right?
That's right.
We've had that forever.
Which,
it's no policy.
You could argue when you do nothing, you're doing something. So.
Right, but it's not a policy. The Attorney General and the President went to zero tolerance. They didn't think through the effect it was going to have on splitting families up. So we had the whole kids in cages thing, and nobody could take that. So that went down. So now we're back to catch and release. There is no wall. And so the open borders crowd keeps winning. How do we change this?
Well, we've got to change it, and I certainly support the president. We've got to secure our borders, and I get frustrated by the left because they say, "Oh, all you wanting to do is to keep people out." Well, it's much more than that. Think about what's happening down at the southwest border. I mean, think about the illegal drugs that are coming across that border. We just talked about the opioid epidemic and how it's gripping our nation, killing 115 people every day. 115 Americans, and yet we've got borders that are porous, that drugs are pouring across. across. We've got human trafficking that's coming across that border. And it's much more than just keeping people out. We have to secure our borders.
How do we do it?
Well, first of all, we support the president in building a wall. I think that's one of the first things we've got to do. We've got to have technology as a part of it as well. We understand that. Technology is a very important part of securing our borders.
What is the Democrats' reasoning when you talk to them, not on TV like we do, but in a legitimate situation? Why do they want open borders? I mean, what is their objective here? It certainly doesn't do anything but depress wages. It takes jobs away. It's cheap labor. It overruns public education and schools and things of that nature. But when you sit in the cloakroom with them, what do they say to you, Congressman?
You know what? I have really tried to understand that, and I've really tried to question my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to figure if there really is a sincere reason why they want this. I have to say that I have not been able to find a sincere reason, except that I think they're just playing to their base, that this plays well to their base, and therefore that's what they're supporting.
But they can't give you a legitimate reason.
I have not gotten one yet.
Because our reason is, I've been saying this forever, it's the unholy alliance. It's the Goldman Sachs, Lower Manhattan, donor-based Republicans that want cheap labor, and the Democrats that want open borders because they want cheap votes. And eventually you keep allowing people to come in unabated. Eventually they'll become citizens or have the right to vote, and eventually they're going to vote for the people that are giving them things, which are the Democrats. So there's the reasoning there. Congressman, the final question, are we going to get to making the personal tax cut permanent before the midterms in the next 6 weeks?
Absolutely. That is on the top of our agenda.
How are you going to do that?
Well, the chair of Ways and Means is Kevin Brady from Texas. In fact, he addressed our conference yesterday and told us about tax cuts 2.0, and that's what we're trying to do, is to make them permanent. We've got a number of things. And, if we've learned anything through this process, one of the things that I hope we've learned is we don't need to wait 30 years before we do tax reform again. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is not perfect. It needs to be tweaked. It needs to be massaged along the way. And I hope that's one of the important lessons that we have learned. But we do need to make these tax cuts permanent, and we're very intent on doing that and believe in it adamantly.
All right, that's going to be it. We want to thank Congressman Buddy Carter from the 1st District of Georgia for being with us. That is South Georgia and along the Georgia coast in Savannah. And you heard it right here, Congressman Carter, another one of my Georgia friends, very bullish on the Falcons this season. And you think they're going to win tonight, right?
I do think they're going to win tonight.
All right. I got too many of my good buddies telling me that Atlanta's just got this great defense. We're going to find out pretty quick this evening. Titans open Sunday in Miami. We have a very young secondary. We never play well in Miami. And my fear is Ryan Tannehill lights our secondary up like a pinball machine on Christmas. Let's hope that does not happen.